Take your time.
Oh, it says I can't stream? No, sorry.
It's no worries. If it doesn't, like I said, sometimes the auditorium can be a little bit wonky. So if it's like not picking up your camera, it's no stress.
Okay. Mm, That's
Perfect. All right. Welcome, friends, family, creatures of the sea. We are going to be doing a meet the team event. This everyone is Twain Martin, and he is the VP of engineering. I know that on the Reddit and in the original announcement, I actually put director of engineering. That was totally on me. That's not his title. He's the VP of engineering. Even more impressive. So, yeah, how's your day going so far, Twain?
Oh, it's going awesome. Just had a really good meeting with the team about what we're getting ready to work on next milestone. So pretty excited about that.
I'm sure everyone here is super excited to learn more about it too. So we do have a set list of questions, just so for everyone who's here, in case you aren't familiar with the format of this event, we do have a set list of questions that we're going to ask. They're going to be primarily targeted at, Twain, meeting Twain, learning more about him and his background. I think you guys will find it really interesting. He's worked on a lot of really cool projects that I'm sure you guys have probably all heard of. Um, and yeah, so we're gonna take some of those questions, and then at the very end, depending on time constraints, we may take some questions from the chat, maybe. But the first question, I think is a good one because it is Friday the 13th and it is October. So, Twain, what is your favorite scary Halloween movie?
You know, first of all, Halloween is my favorite holiday by far.
Oh, good.
We celebrate Halloween here at my house like most people celebrate Christmas. So, um, I have to say it's I don't it's almost impossible to pick a favorite, right? I like Cabin in the Woods because of what they did with all the tropes with all of them. I love the original Halloweens, the original Day of the Dead. Heck, I like the remake of Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorites. Resident Evils, I dig out on all of those. I used to watch a lot of the classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, Werewolf when I was a kid. I remember we had to get up on Saturday morning to be able to watch those. Creature Feature late Friday nights and Elvira, of course. So I was quite a fanatic for horror films. And now I just, I kind of eat them up. I don't gravitate towards the like grotesque kind of things. I like the more like traditional scary tropes.
Totally. I actually agree. I think if I had to pick one, I think I might go with Let the Right One In, but like the original
Oh,
Swedish version, not the remake.
oh
Um,
yeah. Totally, both were good, but that Swedish
yes,
one knocked it out of the park. That
it
was
did.
such a
And
cool concept too.
yeah, and it really, for me, the like biggest thing is I was like, oh, the Swedes make good movies. That's awesome. I never knew that until I saw this movie. Like, way to go, Swedes. Let's go. This movie rocks. Perfect. So, why don't you talk a little bit about just your position at Tempo, and kind of what goes along with that?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm the VP of engineering here, and that kind of puts me in charge of the engineering team and the things that we're working on. And one of the things about engineering that is really important, right, is how do I put this? Um, you could have the most perfect code in the world, but if your code doesn't do what the design team needs and wants, or what the art team needs and wants, or the sound team needs and wants, it doesn't matter. Nobody sees the code. It's invisible. What you see is the product of the code. So it's really, really important as engineers that we're focusing and working on the things that are going to make the game better. Now, where we get into the weeds on that sometimes is that with engineering, specifically for me, I build data driven, system driven game systems, right? And so, because you're building those systems, it allows that functionality for design to be able to push those boundaries. This is something that we learned on the World of Warcraft team when I was working on that and I was building out all the tooling and stuff, is how much power it was to put the ability for the designers to make the items and the designers to make the creatures without ever talking to an engineer or an artist or a sound person, right? We built libraries of things to be able to build those games with.
Perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. And then I wanted to go into a little bit more on like kind of your background from the start. What are some of the games that really inspired you to want to become a game developer over other types of development?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, to answer that, I kind of have to go a little bit into my history. So, up until the time I was like my early teens, I kind of lived in the woods, right? I didn't have access to computers and there weren't really any home computers or anything. And when I used to go into town, we'd get to play with the computers at Sears and places like that, right? And so I'd get playing with those computers. Well, when we eventually moved out of the woods and kind of moved to the big city, I got access to computers and I was able to get a paper route. And with my paper route, I bought a Timex Sinclair with a whopping 8K of memory. And I programmed Lunar Lander on it. And so I did that about 40 something years ago when I was making Lunar Lander, which was kind of my first game. Now, as far as inspiration, I'd have to say Lunar Lander's right at the top. I actually copied it out of a magazine that had the source code. And so I had to like program it out to get it all to work. And it used ASCII and everything on the screen. It was pretty fun. But after that, I got really inspired by, oh, lots of things. Wasteland, the first Wasteland. I can't even tell you how many hours I put into that game. What later would become Fallout, right? And then later to be able to work with Tim Kaine at Carbine and do things like that in my career have been amazing. Um, see what else? Oh, well, of course, EverQuest, Ultima Online. I can't even, I couldn't begin to tell you how many hours I put into either one of those games. In fact, there's a fun fact there. The World of Warcraft team, a very large group of the people there were in a guild of EverQuest that we called Interloop. And we had that, we played that all the way up until we were developing WoW. It was our game. And then when WoW got to a place where we could play it, well, we switched and we started playing WoW.
Yeah. That's I love that lunar lander story. That's so cool. It just really shows like, like copying it the source code like out of a magazine is just such a cool concept that I feel like some of the younger members of the audience would like not even, they're like, "What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?"
Well,
So
at the time, that machine too, and you could still see them online. That at the time, the only way I could get it was I had it shipped to me from England, and I had to actually put the computer together before I could program it because it was just a little hobby kit. And then I graduated from that into a VIC 20, and then from there I went into a PC, like a 8086, and I had some Timex Sinclair. I had a bunch of stuff in there, and I would just keep programming and keep programming as much as I could because it was the only way I could get the games I wanted.
it was rough back then. um, how long have you been working in the gaming space as a game developer? And if you, I know this is going to be a tough one, but if you had to pick one project you worked on professionally in the past that's your favorite to work on, aside from the Bazaar, obviously, which would it be?
Oof, that's tough. Okay, so
Yeah.
I've been professionally making video games for 30 years now. I got my start on at Blizzard. Or before even Blizzard, I was working in databases at Edwards Air Force Base. And at the time, I didn't realize that that would translate to video games. And there was this really cool game getting ready to come out called Diablo. And I was like, oh my God, I want to play this game. And I was working on stuff on the rocket side at Edwards Air Force Base to build the internet. We were bringing the internet to the hill, is what they called it. And so I had internet access and I started communicating with the guys at Blizzard and stuff. And I went down there and I interviewed. And long story short, I ended up quitting my job at Rocket Side to go make video games with Blizzard. And I worked in the customer service department. And that led me to be able to work on databases there and turn the customer service department into a database system. And then that let me write code to interface with the database. And then before you know it, I was working on the World of Warcraft team and I was the database architect for the World of Warcraft. And then that led me into being able to build systems within there. Like I worked on the item system, the spawn systems, the visual systems, the spell effect systems, and got exposure to all of those things and be able to work from that. After I worked at Blizzard, a group of us left to make the game WildStar at Carbine Studios. We formed the group at Carbine Studios. We made the game WildStar, so I spent about 6 years working on that. If you guys think about that, I spent 5.5 years working on World of Warcraft. That's longer than it would have took me to get a college degree. And then I left there and I went to WildStar, and we spent 6 years making WildStar, which would have been another degree. And depending on how I'd done it, I could have probably gotten 3 degrees in the same time. And then after we shipped WildStar, I worked on that for a really long time. And then I got a really good opportunity to work at Defiance on the TV show, sci-fi TV show tie-in series. I got to build the back end for that and architect a bunch of stuff there and work on that. That was a super fun experience, especially when they did Defiance Takeover San Diego and Comic-Con. There's pictures on that on the internet. Awesome. We got to put Defiance inside of the Hard Rock Cafe, and then we got to do it on a barge. I got to meet all the people from like Game of Thrones and stuff like that on the barge. It was super, super fun to work on that. After I worked there for a while, several years, I went on to work at Boston Tencent, where I was working on some unannounced titles that they were doing. And then Boston had this crazy idea that Boston Tencent that they were going to invest in this company called League of Legends. They had this game called Riot. I don't know. Riot has this game League of Legends. It's somewhat, I don't know, whatever. And they decided to invest in that company. The studio I was working for there in Boston for Tencent shut down. And then that led me back here to California, or I'm in Austin now, but I back to California where I worked at Obsidian on Armored Warfare. And we built that tank MMO Armored Warfare. I think it's still running out there on PlayStation. I know it's really popular in Russia and other places like that where they're playing it. Mostly a European type audience. After that, I got to work on some other opportunities like Wave Dash. I did some work there. We were trying to make a brawler kind of game. Got to do a lot of really interesting tech there. I've got to work in the NFT space as Infinite Games to work on Metalcore, an upcoming metal game. Big mech game. It's badass. Check it out. It's online. What else did I get to do? Well, and then since then, I've got to do things like I do consulting with Unity. I've worked with Certain Affinity. I got an opportunity to work with Arcane and those guys on the game Redfall. Real interesting project they were doing there. It was kind of ahead of its time, if you ask me. I've got to work at SciPlay. I worked there for quite some time and helped them out with some of their stuff on the casino level. So, and now I'm actually here at Tempo. And you asked me what's my favorite. All right, this is a long answer because I had a long career. You know, it's hard because every single game that I've worked on all gets a little kind of piece of me, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like asking what's your favorite kid. You can't
Yeah,
really answer that
exactly.
question, right? So I think
True.
my answer to that is it's the game I'm working on now, right? It's the Bazaar.
Yeah. It's
It's the
always the game
next
I'm
game.
working on
It's
now.
always the
Yeah.
next game. That's my favorite.
Yeah. That's so awesome. True. Um, Speaking of games, do you have any games that you like play right now that you enjoy like in your free time? Again, besides the Bazaar.
Yeah. All the time, man. Look, the thing about gaming is you have to stay on top of it. You have to be able to understand what your competitors are doing and what they're doing to outdo you. Like, oh my God, look at that tech. And it's a friendly competitive thing. When I first started in the industry, every Tuesday the games would come out, and heck, we would take Tuesdays off to play them. Right. It was because we wanted to play those games with our friends. And oh my God, you know who so and so, what game they're building and how awesome that is. And things like that, the friends and the relationships that we've built over these years. And so I'm always playing those games. Currently, right now, I'm anticipating and cannot wait for Modern Warfare 3 Zombies. That's the one I'm waiting for. I've been catching up and practicing and trying to get ready. And I
Perfect.
also
Yeah, that's
played Baldur's
awesome.
Gate 3. I also played Starfield some. Some of those games get harder for me. I can't put as much time into them as I'd like.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
especially like the longer, more story narrative driven ones definitely can
uh,
sink a lot of time. Oh man, BG3 though did some amazing things for the space.
yeah,
I'd love to ask you a little bit about, it's prior to working in game development, you said you were working at the Air Force Base. And when you kind of did mostly like almost hands-on training is what I'm understanding, or like you
yeah.
learned as you went. So can you talk a little bit like about prior to getting into like gaming, like how you I know we've brushed on it a little bit, but how you like made your way up to the space where then you broke into the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really hard to sometimes to break into the industry, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that early, right? Like the industry is very different now than it was when I did it. In fact, when I did it, it was even harder because I'll give you an example. I used to take programming tests. When you would go to do a programming test for a company, it would be an 8-hour ordeal that I usually would prep 2 weeks for those 8 hours, 8-hour gauntlets where they would have 4 engineers come in and question you on a whiteboard to try to stump you, and they would rotate them out every hour. So you're literally sitting there talking to 20 or 30 people, trying to impress them all day long with your coding skills and no computer on a whiteboard.
That's
Yeah,
so
I didn't
crazy.
like those
That's
days.
awesome.
Those days are hard. And even
Yeah.
now, I test poorly on those. Now, when we start talking nowadays, I have a very different approach here at the Bazaar because we have AIs here, right? We have a lot of different things. That very thing, I'll give you an example of a question that was on a programming test at Carbide Studios for about 3 years. One of the questions, and we would ask this of any engineer that started to work for us, we'd ask them to write the function to project a vector onto a plane. Okay, I know what all those words mean, but I don't think I could do that right now at this second. With ChatGPT, I could. Right. And so even how we ask questions now are starting to change in the industry because that question isn't as important to me anymore. What's more important to me now is, do you know how to get the answer to that question and get it into the game? That would be a much better question, right? And how would you incorporate that function into the game, or how would you use those things? So it's, the industry's changed a lot. Breaking in now, specifically on that, I think here's the answer. And here's what I've told my children. By the way, my son, who I like to brag about a lot, he's the lead combat designer on World of Warcraft. And he actually got that job without me. He never even put me down on the resume. So I'm super proud of him because he's just kicking butt over there so much and doing all these cool things. But what I tell all of my kids and all the people that I've mentored is, if you want to make video games, you need to start making video games. And that's where it starts. There are tools and utilities out there right now that are free to use, easy to use, and they're revolutionary compared to what I had to go through 30 years ago. 30 years ago, when you wanted to make a game, the first thing you had to do is hire a team that would be able to make a graphics engine for you that could use a graphics card to just be able to render your game. Now you can go get Unreal, you can go get Unity, you can go get Godot. There are dozens of choices of engines that you can use and prototype your games and your ideas. And with the coming I think that's going to get even easier. You should see some of the stuff that's coming out there, and what you're going to be able to do in those engines is going to be amazing. So
Yeah,
what
it's
I would
so
recommend is
crazy.
make a game. You know, when you come to interview for me, if you put on your resume, you're an engineer, you want to work for me, and you put down your GitHub, I'm going to go see your GitHub. I'm going to go look at your code. If you say you're going to design and you have these games, I'm going to go to your webpage. I'm going to play your game. If it's on Steam, I'm going to download it. I'm going to play it. So these things are important. It shows me that you have what it takes to go all the way and to make a game. It's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, about the drive and the finish and the follow through
Yeah,
and showing the determination basically is what really sets you above other candidates.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice. That makes a lot of sense. Um, what would you say are the main differences between like the previous positions you've worked as a developer and like then the your position now or at the previous studios as a game developer from like an actual like coding and architecting and development standpoint?
The difference is now, um, the well, as you're starting your career in engineering, right? When you're a junior, right, you have to do a lot of grunt work. You're doing a lot of typing. You're doing a lot of the things that maybe, um, you know, and they're absolutely important things. But when you think about it, if you have like a high level graphics programmer and you have a junior, it's like you're not going to have him do the high level graphics stuff, just like you wouldn't have the high level graphics guy do the junior stuff. So you really have to start learning how to do that. But that's important. You need to pay your dues in those areas, because one of the things that I teach all of my engineers is the importance of mentoring. So one of the things I kind of talk to them about here is that, like, you want a promotion, your promotion can't be had until you have somebody who can replace you. Well, that kind of requires that you train somebody else what you do. And that means that we try to establish things here where we're always mentoring somebody, right? I take people and I'm mentoring, and those people, I expect them to be mentoring. So that's always part of that process of always be learning and always be changing to get better at something. So we really lean into that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's yeah. I think that kind of ties into my next question, which is as far as from your perspective, are there any like core tenets or specific like philosophies that really influence like you as an engineer or your development philosophy as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I've worked on teams that are as small as 5, and I've worked on teams that are as big as 250. And to me, game development at its core really kind of comes down to that core principle of team. It's all about a team and what can a team develop, right? World of Warcraft was made with a core group of about 40 people, 11 of which were about engineers, and then about 10 to 20 10 designers or so, level designers, things like that. That was the core team. That team put all of their energy and effort into a game, and the game turned out beautiful for it. And I would say the same thing about WildStar, and I'm going to say the same thing about the Bazaar, and pretty much every game I've worked on, right? It's that team that we come through. And I've broken team down into some core principles. So what's a team to me? A team is trust. It always begins with trust. Do I trust you to have my back? Do you trust me to have your back? Are you going to get your jobs done and your responsibilities? Yes, no, that's trust. And being able to trust somebody is really important. Next would be E, right? I break everything down in acronyms. It's an old Air Force habit. So next is E, right? Expertise. Did you get hired to do the job? Is it the right job for you, right? Sometimes you could be an excellent programmer, but you're not very good at this part. Maybe you're not good at graphics. Maybe you're not very good at architecture or databases, but you're excellent at UI or excellent in these other areas. That's expertise. Do we have the right expert for the job? Because that's essential. With trust and expertise, now I know that the job is going to get done. Then there's the A, that's attitude. It's all about attitude. Teams will come together with attitude or without attitude. It'll be bad or good, but that's all based on that attitude, right? You guys can all be in the dumps trying to figure out how to work something out in engineering, and it's tough and it's hard. And as long as we have a strong, happy attitude about it, we'll get through it, right? Together. It's attitude. And then I've already mentioned this. The M in team for me is mentorship, right? It comes together full circle when you start mentoring others because you learn from yourself. You learn what you're teaching, but also what you've learned by teaching others.
Yeah, that's such a cool like mentality as a whole. I totally agree. I know that like in my previous positions, I'm always looking for, people who are going to help me pave the way. Not only, obviously, everyone's always looking for someone to congratulate them on their victories, but it's even more important to have somebody who can, like, lift you up during your defeats or, like, whenever you run into a problem and show you, like, where are your weaknesses and how are you going to shore yourself up as an individual so that, you can move up and you're always improving and always learning. So I think that's so important.
Yeah, always be learning. And as it comes to programming, my best the I would tell you one of the most important thing is to keep it simple. Right? It's really easy as an engineer to over architect anything. And then the challenge isn't to over architect it. The challenge is, can you write what's needed? Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know. I just wanted to. I don't obviously do any like engineering myself, but I think it's always fun when we do your little peanut butter and jelly challenge. So,
Yeah,
Twain does a really fun lunchtime challenge where he'll stand there with a bag of bread that's like tied shut in like a jar of peanut butter and a paper plate and a knife, and he's like, "Okay, let's make a peanut butter sandwich," and he like pretends to be a computer, and it's so funny to watch. You're like, okay, pick up a piece of bread, and he like, is picking up the whole bag because we didn't open it first, and all that kind of fun stuff. So,
exactly.
um, what would you say is your favorite part of game development?
That's a good one. It's interesting. I've worked on games that take 6 years, right? Like we talked about that. That's a long time to do any one thing, right? Um, I think my favorite part is to see the product, right? It's to ship. I know that sounds crazy and a little corny, right? But it's being able to see all that hard work realized for the customer, right? To be able to see that in the public.
Yeah, see the look on the face while they're playing the
Yeah,
game. Watch everybody
exactly.
online talking about it and enjoying it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly.
What does an average day working here at Tempo look like for you?
Well, I'm really lucky. I work with a great team. It's really smart. They all do a really good job. So my day is really just about kind of we're pretty meeting light here at Tempo, just because we believe in open communication and no boundaries and no barriers. So that if there's a problem, you talk to the person. Just like if we were all at the office, we're fortunate to be able to work from home, so all of us kind of have our own little home offices, and we treat work like that. That so my typical day is in the beginning we kind of have some meetings to set up the week, and during the week we'll have different touchstones where we check to see. I stay around and hang out in the chat rooms and stuff to be able to help people kind of with that mentorship, where it's like, look, I know how to do this, but maybe there's a better way, and work with them to get them guided on the right direction. Making sure that engineering is around and supporting all the other departments and making sure that we're supporting them in the right order. As things get bigger and bigger, that's probably the biggest issues. I follow this process that I call blockers, bugs, and then features, right? Blockers are really important to address because they prevent other people from being able to do their job. That comes down to trust and expertise. And then bugs are really important because we want to deliver a good finished product. And often bugs both define and inform things about features, or can be problems for said features. And then last, we would try to integrate features. So ideally, you wouldn't integrate a new feature until the old feature was mostly correct. But game development is difficult. So that balance can take a lot of extra effort. And then sometimes I'll help out by writing some stuff maybe that the team doesn't know how to write, or showing them something about how to write something in the right way. So it's pretty easy in that respect, right? The challenge comes to how do you pull all of those pieces together, and using my knowledge from all the games that I've shipped, and how to keep everything and be able to deliver a game like what we're delivering here for the Bazaar. It's really important because we have a living, breathing game. When this game comes out, it's like having a child. It really is, right? And you have to raise it afterwards, and you have to take care of it, and you have to make sure it stays and running. And because it won't be just the dev team that's playing it anymore, it'll be everybody.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of ties in. So I was curious, like when one of the other departments, like design or art or whatever, when they need something from the engineering team, what do the steps look like for developing something new or some sort of new tool or aspect for them? And what is something you've been working on here at Tempo that you wanted to share with everybody that you think is fun?
Yeah, great questions. So I mean, usually the process works like we'll put together the design, we'll put together their ideas, and then we'll kind of have a kickoff meeting. And in the kickoff meeting, we'll have all the responsible parties in there. We'll have somebody from art and design and programming and all the production and get and sound. Have all those people in the room and make sure that the feature has all the support it needs from all the different departments, right? That's one of the hardest things to do too, is and we're constantly trying to improve on that, where you work on something and it's like, oh, we didn't include audio, or we didn't include art. Or if you make a subtle change in the design or make a subtle change in the code, did the other departments know that that impacted them, and how? Right? Especially as teams get bigger, that gets harder and harder to do.
Definitely. Do you have any one tool that you guys have been working on recently that you want to share with the community that you think would be really fun?
Yeah, so along those lines, part of my job is to constantly be looking out for how to use the latest and greatest technology, and how do I use that for the games that I'm working on. I used to do this at Blizzard when I used a database instead of a file system, right? Like, how do you improve it? How do you make things better instead of, with the status quo? And right now, I'm sure you all have heard about it, but AI is the rage, and we do have a lot of tech. I personally have been working with AI for over a year now, about a year and a half. I use GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. When I'm developing, those things help me iterate on my development processes very fast. All of my engineers use it. We would say that right now, that just by using some of those tools alone, we get 3 to 10 times more performance out of the engineers. Almost all of our processes that we have here are automated. Almost all of our processes have AI in them. We use AI to audit the game before it goes into builds. We use the AI to audit the data that we were generating for the game. And in fact, now we're starting to use some really cool things with AI. We're starting to branch off into areas that I don't think many are doing yet. And we're starting to use AI to help us build the game itself. We have a lore master that we use that talk to about the game and the style of the game. It can talk to you about all the heroes and what they're capable of and what their cards can do. And we use all of that in our tools for developing the game. And not only that, we're actually developing some tech now that is bleeding edge where we're working on the ability to generate our cards using AI end to end.
And with the generation of tool or all these different tools, like how are those affecting like the teams that you're building them for, and like how is it helping them
Great
out?
question. It's a great question. I think the industry, this AI stuff has been trying dropped on everybody's plate, what seems abruptly, right? And I think a lot of people have some misconceptions about what AI is going to do for us. One of the things I like to talk about is like, it's not that AI is going to take jobs or anything, it's going to allow us to do more. And when you're building a gas game like ours, content is king. I'm sure you all have heard that. Content is king, right? And so for us, this opens up doors and allows us to expand and be able to do things that we didn't think were even possible before.
Yeah, really working on, things as small as just getting extra like iterations and repetitions in, just so that
Yeah.
in just less time, right? And things like
One of
that.
the things I'm working on, let's just talk specifically for engineering. One of the things that I'm working on with AI in engineering is that we use AI to do our check ins. That will then automatically do our patch notes for us that we review before they go out to the customer. So there's an example of something you can put AI into your processes with, and that's huge. That saves you a lot of time because that process alone could take hours, if not days, to do. So that's something that we're automating. That's a good example. But it's more than that. It's understanding style guides and being able to do those and getting that consistency. Having AIs that you train that you can use for those things kind of gives you like these arbiters of truth, like the source of truth area and the knowledge of where that comes from, and an easy interface to use to talk to them with chatbots and things like that.
Yeah, it's so cool watching all of the, new tech and being able to, work at a company that's as flexible as Tempo and who are looking to integrate these new technologies and really use them to supplement our current team and aid them in so many different ways.
Yeah. One of the things we like to say here is I want the design team to be focusing on design, not technical mumbo jumbos and all those other things. And we're really using AI now to try to drive home and do those things and to be able to take processes and describe to an AI just in English what I want and then have it actually do those operations for us so that we can literally fire off builds by just talking to the lore master and say, trigger a build, things like that, things that save all that minutia and time, and we could translate that stuff straight into plain English and be able to do really powerful things that save time everywhere.
Super cool. What is your favorite part about working on the Bazaar currently?
Right now we're in an interesting place, right? Where we're trying to get ready to get the game out and get it ready for public viewing and all these other things that are coming up, right? So right before that happens, right before the customer gets to see the games that I'm working on, man, it's stressful. But we're in this really beautiful spot right now where everything's just kind of clinking together, right? It's just like clockwork and it's just going clink, 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 and all the parts are coming together. I love that moment when you see all those parts coming together and then you start to play the game and then before you know it you're able to play the game from home and then before you know it you're playing it on your phone and you're like, oh my god. And we have play tests every week and everybody's coming to the play test with new strategies every day going, well, I think I could do this. And I love just all of that happens to be by far my favorite part.
Yeah, me too. I love just watching the game come together. It's like one of those chocolate oranges. You open it up and it just kind of
Yeah.
unfolds, and you get to see all the cool stuff. That's what it feels like. It's like you get to see all the parts, the culmination of all the hard work, and ending up in just
Yeah.
such a cool way, really. I know you did touch on this a little bit, but for this kind of like last question before maybe we'll field some from the chat. If you were just to give like one or two like additional pieces of advice as far as breaking into the gaming space as someone who's maybe just getting out of there, like they just got their degree, they're coming out of their college, just graduated, or someone who's working in engineering in another field, but they want to move towards
Mhm.
gaming because it's what they're passionate about. What would you have? What would you be the best advice for them?
Yeah, kinda like I was said earlier, what I tell my kids is if you wanna fly airplanes, you better work at the airport, right? And I mean that, like, if you wanna make video games, make video games. Start working on that. Start writing down ideas. If you're a designer, design a game. You can do it. There are lots of style guides out there that you can follow. There are all kinds of ways. If you want to make VFX for a game, start making VFX. Make up your own. You're going to be able to do that and have a good library, right? Have a good portfolio. And that goes the same for engineers. You should have a good portfolio. You're going to impress me a heck of a lot if you come to me with a game and you have the code and we can talk about your code and I'm going to see how you did this and why you were thinking that way. That helps a lot getting into the door. Also, sometimes you just put your foot in the door. Look at me as an example. I got my first job in the industry in customer service, right? And then that led to database work, and then that led to working on the database on World of Warcraft, creating that. That led to doing gameplay, which led to networking, and now from now I can kind of work on all those areas and things. But that was only because I took that customer service job.
Yeah, 100%. That makes so much sense. It's like even if it isn't exactly where you want to end up, like sometimes it's better just to get into the industry than it is to wait for someone to finally sign you up for that perfect job, because then you're there. And I feel like gaming is realistically compared to other industries, it's such a small industry. So you're meeting people, you're networking, and those can be some of the best things as far as getting into the industry and meeting people.
Yep.
Cool.
Actually, I think you asked me one question I forgot to answer though. Now I think about it.
Sure.
You asked me what I would do if I wasn't doing video games, and then
Yeah.
so, I always wanted to do special effects. I actually thought I was going to do special effects in movies. I even took a course in it when I was programming on World of Warcraft. There was they had a course in special effects up in Hollywood, and a friend of mine and I did that together. We thought that, but it's also the thing that kind of bleeds right into making video games. They're all kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
that's
love
so
to field some
cool.
questions though. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so guys, thank you so much, Twain, for coming. We will field a couple of questions from the chat. So if you guys have questions, put them in the auditorium chat, and I'll read them out. I appreciate everybody who came and stuck around. It looks like the first question is: the Bazaar doesn't seem to be an overly complicated game to program, since it's an asynchronous auto battler. Where am I wrong? And it means it takes the team to develop. I understand the need for lots of designers, but why a large programming team?
It's a good question. So right now, I think we have 5 engineers, about 6 engineers. That I think is about right. I need to have engineers that, first of all, let's imagine if we tried to do that with 2 engineers, nobody gets to take a vacation. Okay, so now if we try to do this with 200 engineers, well, nothing would ever get done because there'd be 200 engineers. So you have to find that sweet spot with how many people you need for the product you're working on. If we were working on an MMO, I would think that we'd need more people. But let me give an example of some of the things that our engineers work on. I have one engineer who works and focuses on the back end and making sure that the game will run on all the platforms that we want to be on the phones and things like that. And that's a full-time job almost in and of itself, but he does help out in gameplay and things like that when he can. We have another engineer who focuses on the gameplay and how the gameplay work and the mechanics of the game. We have another engineer who focuses on the responsibilities of the client and how the game looks. Do the cards look right? Do they play their animations right? Do the VFX work right? All of those kinds of things. And then you guys heard me talking about AI. We happen to have one engineer here who specializes, is insanely good at doing data analytics and AI. So he helps me with data analytics and building the game. The game is a data driven game. So we use a lot of AI to help us generate the data. And then we have another engineer who works on AI and tools to kind of put it all together. So just that little team for this kind of a card game. But what we're going to be able to do is output a tremendous amount of content because of this, because of the way we're building it. Now, you could build this probably with one engineer. If you locked them up into a room and you defined it perfectly and he never took a vacation or anything like that, I think you could probably get a lot done, but that's not realistic.
And additionally, I think it really plays back to what you were talking about with your philosophy, where the E in team is for expertise. So, like you said, you could have one engineer who could do all this potentially, but then he might, it might not be the best at all of the stuff he's doing. So bringing in different team members who, are really good at each different part means that not only is that going to be done in a timely manner, you also know that the quality of the work is going to be high because it's what that person's really
Exactly.
good with.
Yeah, and our bar
Perfect.
here is real high. We're trying to strive for a really high quality bar, and as technology gets better, we're increasing our bar.
Perfect. I think I'm gonna hop down a little bit because I think this question actually kind of ties into that one really well. Um, Simf is asking, what does data mean when you say it's a data-driven game for like a layman?
Mhm. That's a great question. So let's see if I can answer it though.
Yeah.
um, so a lot of times in when you make a video game, one approach to doing it, like let's say you have a programmer and that person would sit down and he would just start writing a card game, right? Like if you imagine to yourself we were trying to make the card game War or Poker or something to that, right? Okay, so I take this card game, I sit down and I just write it. Okay, that would make poker, that would make war, but you wouldn't be able to play both those games with the same set of rules. They wouldn't work. They both have 52 cards, but they have completely different set of rules. So when we architect things, we're trying to break things up to make them more flexible and easier for us to use. And the way we do that is by using data. And when I say data driven systems, what I mean is this: a designer on our team can sit down and make a card and see it in the game, and no engineer has to be present. He doesn't have to have an engineer touch the data. He doesn't have to have an engineer make the build for him. He doesn't have to do any of that. In fact, here, everybody can test the game locally before they even check things in to ensure that the quality bar is met so that we don't check in things that are broken. You should be testing before you check in, as an example. So we separate that. In order to do that, you have to be able to do some simple principles. We didn't really go into my coding principles too much, but like one of my coding principles is you have to be able to test it on the client. Anything that you're working means that I have to be able to test it on a client. That means that my engineers have to be able to run our full stack on the client so that they can run a local database to run the local client to test locally. That's what being able to test locally means. If you have just that one principle, it guides all of those things. Next to that, I have a principle which is about data. We do data first here. Everything we do is about data and how the data works. And I'm going to finally answer that question. So when we have a card here at Temple, the data defines what the card is. You could think of the card in the game is just a template, and the data defines what the card displays, what it looks like, how much damage it does, what the flavor text might be, what art it might look at. All of that is abstracted out as just pure data and could work in any place, meaning we could show data on our web pages, we can show data on our launchers, we can show data in the game when you play it. So the data kind of drives everything. It allows us to work on the components that are required to make the game as opposed to just working on a specific game. This becomes exceptionally important when you're making a gas game because once you go live, it's very difficult to change your game. And there are other things that come out from that. As an example, when you work on like TCRs and TRCs for Xbox and PlayStation, they have lots of rigid rules about how you have to follow because rightfully so, they want to make sure that the executable they put on the PlayStation works really good. It can't crash. Well, when you abstract out your data, that allows us to independently patch things without having to go through the long process of updating and getting more approvals because we're not changing the game. We're just changing the data that tells you what the cards are. Long-winded
Nice.
answer, tough question.
No, I think that was an amazing answer. I think it was perfect. I understood where you're coming from. It just feels like the data, because of the way we're using it, just makes the game so much more versatile as a whole. Instead of having kind of these
Exactly.
static objects in the game, we can put them on the website or update them at any time.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a
Mhm.
great
We did
answer.
that. I do this in all the games that I've worked on. I did this virtually every game I've ever worked on. World of Warcraft is an example. When I created the item system, the item editors, and the NPC editors, we then hired people that did nothing but data input to create all the NPCs in the world, right? And that wasn't me that did that. That was those people who put their heart and soul into creating all those NPCs to get them into the game. But I created the systems that allowed them to get in there. Not just me either, right? That takes a collaboration between lots of engineers.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts on the gaming industry right now? It feels like there's constant layoffs, and studios are mostly looking for seniors. As a game design student graduating and heading for the job world with as a 3D VFX artist next year, it seems daunting.
Yeah, it's tough. The industry is constantly changing, and it has been since I started. And I can give you guys examples. When I started working on video games, we used to program in Notepad, not Visual Studio. There wasn't a Visual Studio. That wasn't a thing. Right? And so it changed. We got tools for Visual Studio. Well, the industry, in my opinion, is going through a change now because we are getting new tools. We're getting out of a cycle. The hardware cycle's done, right? We have the PS5, we have these awesome consoles. These are things that I would have drooled over 10 years ago, right? Like these are amazing machines. They're rocket PCs on your desk, right? Like you play games with her in your living room. And so that cycle is hitting its maturity. And think about what that means. When hardware first comes out, usually programmers and artists and designers and everybody are struggling to get their content and everything to work on that new format or to make it look prettier or to be able to use the more horsepower, the more graphics, and the more things. That doesn't happen until after the consoles usually come out. And that usually takes 2 to 4 years. And so we're kind of at this place right now. We're almost, I don't want to call it a peak, but we're priming, I think, for the next thing. If you ask me, I think that's AI. For me, as a game developer, I cannot tell you how excited I am about the things that I can do with AI that I never could do even 4 years ago. And there are things that I'm working on that like change the way I think about making video games. Full circle to the industry. The industry is going to have to go through some change to be able to accept these things, right? That's going to shake things up. And there are going to be people that impacts, right? Those people also have opportunity now. If you have that drive and that passion that we're talking about to make video games, if you really have that, I suspect we're getting ready to go into an industry that anyone will be able to make the video game of their dreams. Certainly, I think in the next 5 years that'll happen. The tools will be that good. Imagine what you could do right now with the Unreal demo just by downloading it and taking the Matrix demo and compile and run. Now you have a whole little world to play in. Make a game. Somebody go make
True.
Rampage and destroy the buildings. Right? Matrix meets Rampage. Why not? Things like that. Those are the things that our industry is going to be able to go to. And pretty soon, once the hardware is there and everybody's ready and all that is kicked in and the AI and the tools, and we get through those cycles, I think people are going to make games that we can only dream about right now.
I totally agree. I want to add a little bit too because this is actually something I was just talking with one of my mentors about last week. I had brought up to her the epic layoffs where I just thought that they laid off 16% of their workforce, which I just thought was just a like astronomically huge number for a studio of that size. And one of the things she said to me is she said, when she worked at Microsoft, even when they were laying off large amounts of people, they were still hiring, which
Yeah.
seems kind of like, an oxymoron, obviously. But the thing is, you want to always look at the people who are getting laid off, right? So for me, she's like, so if they're, you see a company and you really want to, look into them, are they laying off communications? Are they laying off marketing? Or
Yep.
are they laying off developers and designers? Well, if they're laying off people that aren't a part of your department, there's a good chance that they might be hiring the opposite department because that's what they need right now. So,
Yeah.
just because you see huge numbers of layoffs in the industry doesn't necessarily mean that those companies aren't looking for you and your job position. So,
That's right.
make sure that, you don't let those layoffs scare you and you actually kind of look into them and see what's happening because the companies aren't just laying people off for fun. They have a reason behind it and a strategy. And so there's a chance that their strategy involves picking picking up people exactly like you, and that actually may increase your chances of being able to be hired.
No, it's a really good point. Sometimes those things happen and you don't, I remember StarCraft Ghost, you can look that one up online. That was, I thought, was gonna be an amazing game, and we put that one on hiatus when I worked at Blizzard, I think is what they said, right? Now Blizzard was big enough that they could absorb that team. That was a beautiful thing. That was awesome that Blizzard could do that, right? When you're working on small teams and things like that happen where a project gets canceled, sometimes you have to make the tough calls and you have to make tough decisions. And I can even say that like this. Let's say you had a amazingly great, awesome network engineer, was the perfect network engineer. In fact, maybe these things could happen to me sometimes. And they were not working on a network engineering job anymore. Well, you don't need multiplayer guy, and I'm a multiplayer guy. Uh-oh. That's not a reflection on me. That's just a reflection on the state of where the industry is. And sometimes those decisions aren't done by us. They're done by board members and executives and things like that, right? And so you can't take it personal, I guess is what I'm going at with it. Don't take it personal, just put your boots back on and go find your better job.
Definitely. Um, this is, I think, is a pretty good question. How much easier is the new pipeline compared to the old one, and was it worth the time delay? So, Andre has spoken kind of in past Q and A's and stuff about the pipeline we had. Oh man, over a year ago now, and how we had decided that we were going to kind of update that, and so the community is aware. Like that's something that we've been working on recently in the background. So just for a little bit of background on this question. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I've been here for almost a year now. I as you can imagine, being a developer for as long as I have a very specific way that I like to do things. We talked about data-driven approaches and things like that. I find that when you build a gas game with a data driven approach, right, and we build systems that can be connected together logically, when we do that, it gives our designers the best flexibility. One of the things that's going to happen with our game is eventually the customers are going to start playing it. Everybody's going to be giving us feedback, and we're going to want to be able to iterate on that feedback, right? We want to provide the best experience for our customers. The best way to do that is to build systems that are data driven, that puts the power into the hands of the people. Our art team, as an example, can make visual effects and get them in the game without us even touching it in engineering. That's a good example, right? Same with sound, same with design, and being able to do that and have those prices. So for me, was it worth it? I would have said it was essential. It's the only way that I could have provided the experience that Andre wants for this game.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, basically like the old pipeline might have been if we were just building like a ship it done type of game, then it might have worked
Exactly.
for that. But because we're doing, we constantly want to be iterating and updating and putting out new characters and patches and items and all kinds of things like that, it just wasn't, feasible with the old pipeline. We really needed this more data-driven approach, exactly like you explained earlier, to make it
Yes.
more versatile.
Exactly. I didn't want us to be Andre nor myself wanted us to be locked into those decisions. We wanted the ability and the flexibility that we could do more, and the more we build our tooling and the more that we can make, that we'll have a systems that allow us to deliver more content to the customer. I think I saw somebody flash content is king. You are absolutely right. Nobody cares what my lunar lander code looks like. They only played the game, right? Like that is the truth. Nobody talks about what the code looked like underneath WoW and things like that. Although it was really nice. If you ask me, I think WoW had really nice code base. But the point is that you don't look at those code bases. What you do is you look at the outcome, and that is the combination of all the things: art, sound, design, code, all of it coming together in a perfect orchestra.
Perfect. We're getting right towards the end here, so I think we'll just grab one more. I think the last question I saw here was release aside, how much of the code would you gauge is done and ready? Optimizations aside as well. I'm not
Oh,
trying to hype people up for no reason, as I'm aware that there's no reference to release dates, but I was just curious.
yeah, that's a great question. So we talked a lot about this event driven. I told you this is a real exciting time where all the pieces are kind of coming together, right? And that's it. See, to me, when we say we're getting ready, that means that all of these pieces are in motion. All of these pipelines are working. The art team can do the art that they need. They can add better visuals. They can extend their things. They can polish. The design team has all the abilities to make the cards that they want to get the interactions they want from the heroes, right? The art team or the sound team has all the music working and all those pieces. When all those pieces start coming together and they're working in their fundamental basics, that's when I would say, not that we're code complete, because to the point, there is no such thing as code complete. We're making a game that is a service, and forever we're going to be constantly pushing the bar for ourselves to see if we can take this to the next level. And if we hit that level, then we're going to start looking to see where that next bar is. And can we hit that next bar? And how far can we push this? Because there isn't an end. We're just trying to make a game that everybody can play, a community.
Perfect. Beautiful. I think we will call it there. Twain, thank you so much for your time. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot personally. For anyone who wasn't here at the beginning, Twain is our VP of Engineering at Tempo. So thank you for taking time. I know you're a busy schedule, so I appreciate you coming
Oh,
on.
no problem. I loved it. It was a great time. Thank you so much.
Definitely. And thank you for everybody who stuck around. We did make it to the basically the hour mark, so I appreciate you everybody who hung out. And yeah, I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.
Hey guys, keep gaming. Talk to y'all soon.
See ya.